Hey guys, welcome back to another Q&A on April, it's April 12th, 2020. It'll probably be the 13th or 14th before I get this out, but but it is nonetheless the 12th right now. So, excuse me. Let's go ahead and dive into this. The last couple of Q&As have been good. I've been able to get them down to about 5 questions is kind of my goal, so they're not too terribly long, but first one here, we'll start on Facebook. Starting to read more about proper estradiol range being subjective to one's total test range, as in a ratio rather than just an arbitrary 20 to 50 or whatever. Any merit to this? If so, what do you feel is a good ratio? I ask because my last blood work had my test at 1100 and my estradiol at 67, and my physician wants to script me 1 milligram a week of anastrozole, even though I'm asymptomatic. All right, so yeah, the whole androgen to estrogen ratio thing is something that I've talked about a lot. We've talked about it on the OPD podcast, especially multiple times. And it's not just testosterone to estrogen, but in this case, yeah, I mean, we are looking at testosterone to estrogen. Now, it's important to understand a couple things. So we obviously aromatize testosterone into estrogen, and not every single person will aromatize at the same rate. There are other factors that can impact the amount of aromatase activity, such as stress or other hormones disrupting the feedback loop somewhere downstream. So, I mean, it's not always going to be a set thing. Like, person A has a total test of 1,000 and their estradiol is going to be 50, and then it's the same for person B. No, that's not how it works necessarily, but yeah, I mean, there are kind of some ratios you can look at. Now, it's hard to say an exact number. This is something I've gone over with my doctor several times, and even ratio, you know, he doesn't seem all that concerned with many ratios, even in like the 10 to 1 range. So you're talking, if your test levels were 1,000, then your estradiol is 100. It's probably okay, assuming you're asymptomatic. It's good, and I hate to use the word "it's good" because I don't want to make it an absolute statement, but it's usually in your best interest to try to let your body aromatize naturally and not introduce more drugs into your body, even if it's being prescribed. And people are like, "Oh, it's a prescription, right?" Well, yeah, but obviously there are downsides to using it, and it gets hard to, you know, if you overcorrect, and then it gets hard to recorrect and bring it back up, and it's just kind of like chasing your tail. And then having too low of estradiol can have, you know, negatives in and of itself. So if you're asymptomatic and you're aromatizing naturally, and especially what you're saying here, 1100 and then 67 estradiol is not any, like, I mean, your test levels are 1100, so they're over the top of the physiological range. So yeah, of course, your estradiol is probably a little bit over physiological range too. Like, for example, mine, my estradiol might be in the 50 or something, like around 50-ish. If I get my labs done and my test levels are like 875 or 900, and that's my prescription. It's about 150 milligrams test a week. So, you know, that's normal. Like, it's just, that's where I feel fine. If I go try to drop them, I don't feel as good. So yeah, anywhere in that probably 5 to 1, 10 to 1-ish range, I mean, you're pretty much set, assuming you're not having any terrible symptoms. And I know people think, like, I think people psych themselves out too, and they see the number and they think they're symptomatic of something, and I don't think it's as true as often as people think it is. So if you can leave it alone, it's probably best. But I hope that kind of sums it up. It's hard for me to say, give an exact ratio, but I gave you kind of a range there. And, you know, obviously it's going to be higher if you're supplementing with something else and your androgen levels are higher. I mean, it's going to be higher, right? It's more and means more aromatization depending on what it is you're consuming, right? But yeah, I'm not your doctor. Obviously, this isn't medical advice, you know, so you have to talk it over with your doctor, but I wouldn't see anything wrong with a 67, especially with a test level of 1100. All right, so next one. Big fan. Since the other podcast days, Beast Fitness, please talk about back training at home. I can't talk. Specifically lats with bands, dumbbells. And I have now recently acquired an adjustable bench. Thanks always. Yeah, I mean, you still have a lot of options there. I don't know how big your dumbbells are, but, you know, obviously many different rowing variations. You can manipulate the angle of your elbow and that's going to manipulate where you're hitting yourself in the back. If you want to do, you know, more trap, rhomboid, you know, teres, and then maybe tuck a little bit more if you want to do more lat. So options could be like a one arm bent over row if you wanted, or if you wanted to do a bilateral row. I personally like bilateral rows a lot because I feel like it's just less chance of kind of twisting and using the oblique, and more chance of getting being able to drive your elbow back to like parallel or past your body, even to get some of those other muscles to activate and not just make it a lat movement. I know you're talking about lats, but you can recruit other things that way. Excuse me, guys. I can't get my throat clear today, but yeah, you could do it face down on an adjustable incline bench. You could do it standing with your head on the bench, you know, have the end of the bench here, like post your head on there and row that way. You're using a little more core and a little more erectors that way. You could do it with nothing. You could just stand up and do a bilateral row just standing like that. I mean, that works as well. It just tends to, like, I notice people get a little bit too much like rocking up and down motion and that. But you could try that. So you got a lot of row variations there. If you wanted to change the resistance curve or you didn't have enough resistance, you could stand on a band and grab the band on the handle of the dumbbell on the other end to give you more resistance. Assisted pull-ups, you know, obviously regular pull-ups, you have anywhere you can do a pull-up. Banded pull-ups if you want assistance, you know, stand on the band, wrap it around. Assisted pull-ups, can change grips on there. I mean, there's a lot of different options there. Rack chins, if you have any kind of bar or anything, you can put your feet out in front of you, something that's lower, and you can do rack chins on it. And there's a lot of things that you can do with that. You want to do more like a straighter arm variation, you can do a pullover you have your bench, so you can do a pullover with the dumbbell for lats. You can do a banded dumbbell pullover with the lats, attach the band back to something behind you, and then attach a dumbbell in your hand and do the pullover that way. You could literally do a banded pullover where I like to do them standing and tie the band up above and pull down through like that. I mean, there's a lot of options. I probably just named like 10 things. So if you can't train your lats with that, you're looking too hard. That's plenty to train your lats with. I mean, that's the kind of stuff that I pretty much do in my normal training anyhow, and it's good stuff for anyone to do in normal training. So even though you're at home, that's pretty normal back training, or lat training, I guess, if you will. Now, all right, let's rotate over to, I have some other questions here, hang on. What has been the most challenging and rewarding aspect of being a business owner? Well, I've had two businesses now. One of them wouldn't say it failed, but I got rid of it before it got too bad. I did own a gym for a couple of years. Didn't really like that industry. Part of it was the demographic that I had in the area wasn't really good, I don't think, for that type of business. Even though I had sufficient members and stuff, it just wasn't really lucrative. So that was challenging. It's challenging to know. It's challenging to know when you should keep persevering, not give up, so on and so forth, or when you should just cut your losses and bail. You know, it's at a point, chase your dreams, right? But at a point, stupidity and just continuing to dig yourself in a hole and bury yourself isn't always the best thing either. I think there needs to be a middle ground there. Nothing wrong with failing. There's nothing wrong with not getting, you know, reaching a goal. Sometimes it happens. But you have to kind of find that middle ground and not set yourself back too much. But currently with coaching, since that's been 2020, that's been, you know, over 10 years helping people and coaching full time for probably 8 of those. Started coaching people around 10 and a half years ago, probably coaching full time around 8 years. Yeah. So, man, I mean, rewarding, there's lots of rewarding stuff. Rewarding stuff's helping people. Like that should be the most rewarding thing anyhow. The most rewarding thing should always be seeing your clients succeed and you getting a rise out of that just as much as they do. And really wanting to see them succeed, because not only does it have your name on it, but it's also why you started doing this in the first place. And that's with a lot of businesses, especially ones that are providing service, right? You should be showing people that you care, right? So that's important. Also, other rewarding things, when people tell you that you're doing a good job, or people, you know, praise you or whatever, yes, you should always take compliments a certain way and not let them kind of fill your head and not let them make you too lax. But yeah, of course that feels good. That's awesome. It's one of my favorite things. It's my, you know, like prepping someone for a show. That's cool, right? It does. There's a lot of, it's really cool and really rewarding to see them go through the process and achieve something, and maybe their best condition ever, their best showing ever, whatever it is. That's awesome. But also other things, like somebody's had an ailment that they've had been struggling with for a long time, and you help them work through it and you improve their health, and all those things are extremely rewarding. So, I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you're going to be rewarded. But yeah, I mean, just people's success is always going to be the best reward, in my opinion. And I think it should be. If anytime you're in a service type industry or you're helping someone achieve something, you should be driven by their success and you wanting them to succeed more than anything. I mean, if they keep succeeding, or if you're helping people, you're gonna succeed too, right? Difficulties, I mean, it's a saturated market now. It wasn't as much when I started, but it definitely is now. What other things are challenging? A lot of hours. It's a lot of work. I mean, it is a lot of hours. I feel like to build an organic, in a business organically, that's not just built on really fancy marketing and kind of making it seem like you're maybe a little better than you are, or doing things to draw people in and this and that. Like, really just building it organically off of good service, passive marketing, like, you know, showing off your clients and stuff and putting out information for free or whatever. Like, that kind of stuff gives good clients, right? And retention of clients, which is the big thing. In my opinion, doing it correctly. Like, I'm not a marketing expert. I feel like I just kind of passively market just by doing a good job and talking about what my clients do and putting out info and all that stuff. But it's not like ads or like sensationalism. Like, I'm not sensationalizing things. Like, it's hard to do it the right way because it's the long way, but a lot of times it's the best way. So yeah, I'd say that's one of the more challenging things. And then the other thing is, and I'm sure everyone, that even people that are super successful, they still have this go through their head, is that, am I doing everything that I could be, or am I doing things right? Because you start to question, you can question things at times, because it's not like, if it's just you and you're not working for somebody or a boss, or you don't have a department or a team or anything around you that kind of is reassuring you and giving you tips and tricks and guidance, and you don't have a, you don't have a marketing expert helping your team or whatever, like, it's, you have to just trust that you're doing the right stuff. I mean, obviously the results tell you that you're doing the right stuff, but you can still question yourself. I mean, I still do. I still think, oh, should I be doing this or this or this that somebody else is maybe doing that I'm not? Or is what I'm doing better than what they're doing, or, whatever it is. So you got to do your thing your way. As long as it's working, it's probably good to go. I hope that's insightful. A couple more here. So, best age, level of training experience, and level of nutrition experience to begin utilizing anabolics in a very low and calculated manner. Best is a very relevant term here. How long has a person been training? They said level, right? Yeah, age comes into this, right? But also, like, you always hear people talk about maximize natural potential, right? Younger person's probably going to have a little more natural potential, just because hormonally they're a little bit more equipped than somebody that's not young, right? But that doesn't necessarily mean a 30-year-old or a 25-year-old is going to be way different than a 40-year-old if the 40-year-old's only been training for a couple of years. You know what I mean? So it's that's where experience comes in. If if you're doing everything right, and you're progressive with your programming, and you're progressive with your nutrition, and you have a good grasp on everything, and you've made good progress, and everything's just really slow. And that's not to say that you just give up and go in on take whatever, but if you've tried other things, and you've tried to maximize everything, and recovery and sleep and stress and so on and so forth, and all that stuff, and your progress is still like slowing every year, or every time you try to make more progression, then yeah, you might be close to maximum, or you're closer to the higher end of your natural ceiling, and that that may be the right time. It's a personal choice, right? I would never tell anyone to just do it here, do this or do that. Like, it's totally up to them. It's a big decision. It's a permanent decision, more or less. But yeah, I mean, try to maximize as much as you can. You should always continue to learn, right? It's nothing wrong with continuing to learn all the time. But there are a lot of people that lack a lot of knowledge, and they have a lot of gaps in their programming, in their nutrition, in their sleep and recovery and stress management, and understanding of just overall health and functionality of body systems. And you don't have to be an expert, right? It's not your profession, that's fine. But not understanding a lot of those things, and then just thinking, oh, I just need to dive into this, not the best thing. Yeah, hope that helps. I know that's not like a super clear answer, but I hope that gives us some more insight. Last one, best cycle for cut. No idea. Honestly, I mean, anything hormonally, anything anabolic wise is going to help retain tissue. It's not like one doesn't really do more than the other in that regard. It's all going to help retain tissue. I know there obviously some things are deemed more of a cutting agent than others because of their characteristics, right? They aromatize, or they don't aromatize, or they're DHT or whatever. What you feel best on, that's one. That's not going to be the same for everyone. What gives you the most cosmetic effect that's another, because in reality, cosmetic effect, some extra help with muscle retention and potentially fullness, maybe a little bit more strength retention. Like, that's essentially what you're going to get. It's not like these things are going to just melt fat off you at some crazy accelerated rate. So that's not what they are. That's not what they do. So what makes you feel best and look best is probably going to be best. But I know that doesn't really answer the question, but that is the answer. There are a lot of compounds that can fill that gap in a lot of different combinations. Without knowing anything about a person, it's difficult. It's difficult to say, because it's not going to be the same. But, obviously, like, the traditional ones would be potentially an aromatizing compound, and then kind of lower that amount of aromatization as you go on and add the DHT type compounds later on. And that's pretty much the traditional route, right? But that's not to say that there aren't other ways based on the person. But I mean, that's the traditional, typically, and it works for 90% of people. I couldn't sit here and just lay out the whole thing, like a whole thing. That's not really practical. So T3, yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what you want to know about. It says T3 and GH. I don't really know what you want to know about them. Thyroid, yeah, I mean, thyroid typically downregulates with enough time under caloric restriction. Using a dose that would replace natural thyroid levels could be helpful in preserving that metabolic function. So it could be T4 and T3 together, even, to make it more like bioidentical, right? But yeah, it just needs to be used at a typical replacement dose. GH, I mean, the main thing with that is free fatty acid mobilization. That's going to be the main benefit during a fat loss phase. It's around 2-ish IUs, pretty much going to help with maximal free fatty acid mobilization in a fasted state. It's going to take a few hours to fully maximize free fatty acid release. So you're going to need to stay fast. You're going to need to do some kind of non-glucose intensive activity like walking or lower intensity cardio, so on and so forth, to help kind of burn off those free fatty acids that are released to help take advantage. That is, in a nutshell, how it's going to work in that context. But that question's way too vague for me to give you a for sure answer, but I hope that gives a little more insight into kind of like a thought process. But that's it for this week, guys.